This is the Startupsdilse podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Do us a favor, subscribe on YouTube or LinkedIn, and be sure to give us your feedback. Hope you enjoy this episode.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for a brand new episode of Startupsdilse. As always, I'm your host, Anthony Prakash, and today I'm delighted to be joined by Sachin Gaur, who's joining us from Finland, and he is currently the co-founder of a very exciting startup called Ukumi, and he will tell us more about it. But besides that, he has a fascinating background as someone who has always looked to solve problems with startups and products of its own. I had a chance to meet Sachin while he was visiting the Bay Area last year. His being on this podcast is a testament to how impressed I was with his background and what he's doing. So Sachin, first of all, welcome to the show. Thanks for taking the time late on the evening with your time in the Nordics.
Yeah, thanks, Anthony. When you said last year, it seems like it was just yesterday, but now that the calendar has changed, it seems like we have to call it last year.
Indeed. We just think 2024 started and it's going to be awesome. Here we are in 2025, right? So before you know it, you're going to be rocking with Ukumi as well, right? So so before we get started, Sachin, with the company, with what you're currently doing, it'll be great to tell the audience about who you are, where you come from, what are you currently working on, what took you from India to the Nordics, anything at a high level you can share to kick us off.
Yeah, definitely. So originally I come from India, from a suburb called as Ghaziabad near Delhi. So I did my initial schooling there, and then I went to New Delhi for my, let's say, higher education. I went for my bachelor's in AIinMedia, where I studied computer science. And right from the campus, I got an opportunity to work for Adobe. And I think working in Adobe was very transformative for me because it was, a small company back then in 2005 in India. Of course, it's an American company, but in India, they had a smaller office. And going there as a computer science student, I realized that, you could create file formats, you can do a lot of things. I got lucky while being at Adobe. I realized that you could patent your ideas. So I got 10 in my initial 3 months. And that gave me a lot of kind of confidence that you could build a lot of stuff in the knowledge economy. And I started to read about, in general on internet, because Adobe had high speed internet. And I realized that, that some people were writing, they were like anthropologists, that people in India may not use computers, but they may use mobile phones as their kind of first computing device or to connect to internet. And I started to look for, where are the places in the world they build mobile phones. And then I zeroed upon Finland because Nokia used to be, a dominant player making mobile phones back in those days. So I applied for a master's program. I got a good scholarship. And that's how I ended up for my master's in Finland. My master's program was called Mobile Computing and Security. And I ended up studying more security than mobile. But, there was this thing about my own background, coming from a humble background. My mother still to date do not have a phone. So I was kind of very interested in, can I build a phone for her? So my master's was all about, dreaming about an interface which is literacy neutral. So I built a contact book because I realized that most people in India back in those days, if they had a phone, they were not using contact books, they were using speed dial, and they, like most people in the rural areas, they would have only 5 contacts. Yeah. And I realized that being privileged, connected, online, educated, that opportunities come to you if you have more contacts. This podcast is a example of that. So if we have contact, I have the opportunity to talk to you, right? So I see that there may be like smart and intelligent people, but if they don't have opportunities, they are where they are. And I wanted to change that. So I was doing my doctoral studies beyond my master's. And that's when I got conviction that, I should leave my research and, go back to India to start my company. And long story short, so that's where my kind of entrepreneurial journey started in 2010. And I was always kind of chasing those problems which are closer to my heart. So, for example, this thing that I wanted to build, like a literacy neutral kind of mobile phone, I ended up building a proto WhatsApp kind of an app called as Mobile Harvest for India. Went to Telangana, which is, back then it was called Andhra, and spent time touring the entire state because they used to have a lot of farmer suicides back then. And I built this application which people could use without reading writing skills by sending voice messages to each other, and I realized that they had exact same behaviors as people would have on Facebook, and people would care about their profile pictures and they would wish each other happy birthdays. And the head of UN Women in India saw this because somebody made a film on it, and she wanted me to build this as a real company. So sometimes for me, this kind of pursuit, like they start with a curiosity, like it's a problem that I want to solve, but they eventually become like a full venture. So it has happened to me in my life, I would say, couple of times that I was curious, I was stuck to something, and I tried to do something about it, and then eventually it becomes a company. So yeah, that's where I am.
Yeah, fascinating backstory, Sachin. First off, I would say, I mean, I'm a strong believer in being in the right place at the right time. Whenever it's in your career is super important. Obviously, our stars need to align for something like that to happen, right? So we thank the gods for that, I guess. So Adobe is not a bad place, shabby place to start off your career, right? I've been a big fan of Adobe for a really long time. I really think their products are like world class, right? For a long time. I've attended a bunch of their conferences as well in Vegas, and one of the best put conferences I think that I've attended from them. So lucky you got to start off your career in Adobe. I mean, and at least for a long time, I mean, they were at the forefront of innovation, right? So it's kind of is a solid backbone, if you will, for where your career to start. And then from there on, I mean, obviously you get high-speed internet to your point for you to harness that and use it and to apply it. Great story, Sachin. So, I mean, one of the things I always ask founders and a lot of I mean, I also believe, there's a little bit of a founder in all of us, right? I mean, we all have ideas, but very few step out their comfort zone, including myself, and go execute it, right? So what gave you that confidence, willpower to say, okay, I mean, I see this problem and I think I have an idea to solve for it. I mean, you're obviously letting go of a good paying job and you're in your comfort zone. How did you get that conviction to say, okay, I mean, I really want to solve for this. I mean, it might fail, right? But I mean, is there someone in your life who kind of encourages you, or in those early stages, to be a mentor, if you will, to go do that?
Yeah, I think it's interesting what you say. And I've often found myself that, especially my parents, they were not a lot educated. So I did not have anyone to go and ask for advice. And I have to solve things on my own. So in that regard, I found that independent decision making was one trait where I really benefited. So I would say that growing up, in India, in an environment where I did not have something which I can easily rely upon, I had to make my own decisions. Mm-hmm. It's not that they were always for good, but this ability that I can decide for myself, I think it's a privilege. Yeah. I would put it that way. So that's probably is what it boils down to.
Yeah, I mean, that's the other thing, right? I mean, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because circumstances, right? I mean, your family situation, whom you surround yourself with, and not every situation is the same, right? So that also kind of contributes in a big way to successful startups, to successful entrepreneurs. And there's always that spark or that energy that you build up yourself. So good. Thanks for sharing that, Sachin. So you did your studies, you did Adobe, then you saw, okay, I mean, Nordics or Finland is where they're making the mobile phones at that time. I mean, Nokia was like a world dominator, if you will, right? So how was that shift in environment for you? I mean, was it like, oh my God, what did I do? Or, did it give you that sense of freedom saying, oh, this is a great stepping stone to what I want to do next?
Yeah, I think if I sample different points in my life, like doing my undergrad in one of the government universities, it was quite cheap education and we didn't really know, what could we do. I mean, if I go back to college today, maybe I would probably want to do as many internships and let's say, build a startup while I'm in the college
Yeah.
because you are really blessed to have a good, team players and you don't have to search for them while you're in the college. But we ended up spending our time chasing competitions. So, for example, me and my classmates were presented at university in a national level quiz competition. We whiled away time, I would say, while we were in college. But in Adobe, like I said, I got a different inspiration through internet and I started to learn about things which were very fundamental. So Adobe was really enriching because people were coming from a very different approach, I would say, than, where I was a bit unguided in Jamia. I got some kind of pathway in Adobe that you could protect your idea, you could patent them, things like that. But when I ended up in Finland, so I was in this program where we had to go to 5 countries. So I chose Finland and Estonia. So Estonia, I did my exchange program. And I also did my summer in CERN, in a nuclear physics laboratory in Geneva. Back in those days, they were starting the Large Hadron Collider. So I was really lucky to be in some of the topmost research environments, I would say, in the world. Because
Very nice.
in Finland, for example, one of the professor who came to teach us during my doctoral studies, he used to head Nokia for 10 years. So he had seen it all from 96 to 2006. Urionevo was the CTO of Nokia. So he would bring one CEO to our class every week. And I always tell this to people that, my professors in Finland were saying light is coming from the east. So I was wondering what I'm doing in the west because we were writing a book on China. So that environment where you could really question anything and think about future, because Nokia was starting to go down. I was in Finland from 2007 to 10. So they were not, I would say, the prime days of Nokia. These were days when Apple had already come up with a touchscreen phone and Apple started to dominate, and Nokia was already, I think sold very quickly to Microsoft.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was, I would say, the whole mood in Finland was, of self-doubt. What happens beyond Nokia. There was a transition period. Even our university, they ended up changing the name. We were called the Helsinki University of Technology. Now it's called the Aalto University. The logo of Aalto is A with a question mark. So the idea was question everything. And I had the privilege to be in an environment where it was taught that students can do anything. For example, my peers in Finland, the student group, we started Aalto Social Impact, which was to connect the social sector people to the university. My peers, they started Aalto Entrepreneurship Society, which ended up creating Slush, which is one of the largest events in the world about entrepreneurship. So in our eyes, while we were students, we thought we could do anything. So we would have the prime minister candidate, we would have the philosophers, we would have all the resources that we could think of. So I think Finland just amplified my confidence. Like, it's like a step-by-step process, right? So every exam you crack, every award that you win, it kind of reinforces your belief that you can take on a bigger challenge. So I think for me, leaving a cushy job from Adobe to Finland, my scholarship amount was more than my job salary. So financially, it was not that difficult. Although if I would have stayed at Adobe in the last 15 years, the stock market has really rewarded Adobe in that sense. So I would have probably not been a bad decision to stay at Adobe, but I think I wanted to venture out. And with every step, I wanted to realize that what's beyond, so I think that's more about curiosity. And when I went to CERN, I could see a lot of top tier scientific people, although I'm not from physics. But it was enriching. And when Oreo started to bring these CEOs of big companies to us, when we were writing this book, we were visiting China. So I was quite convinced that, if I have to go and build something, then maybe I should go back to India. And around the same time, a classmate of mine, he was in Africa and he wanted also to leave. So we came back and we started this venture. So maybe it never happened like a step function. It is brimming in you, like, and every year you start to think about, okay, maybe you can do it.
Awesome. Awesome. So let's talk about your venture. You call it Ukumi. I mean, is there a backstory to why you called the company Ukumi?
Yeah, so I think, like I said, I've always been fascinated by my own problems. Like my mother was inspiration for this story that I told you about Mobile Harvest. So around 2017, my car was stolen and it was in Delhi. And, I thought they have CCTVs, they can find it. It turns out that they have CCTVs, but they don't have time to look at them because if you're somebody ordinary, why should they, traverse the traffic cameras of the city? So we built a company around the time. It's called Samajh.ai. So Samajh is like the Google of traffic in India. So it can, so today, for example, if a car theft happens in Delhi, the police can come to Samajh and ask, can you tell us if this car was seen on this national highway? So when I was part of this venture, building this venture, AI was kind of becoming mainstream in this current avatar, although the topic of AI exists for last 60, 70 years, but the way deep learning made an impact in 2013 and around 2017, we all kind of convinced that, okay, maybe we can solve this traffic monitoring problem as a supervised learning approach, collect data, train models. This is what we did until 2020. And around this time, I was leaving India for good. And, although you attributed my location today to Finland, but I'm actually in Oslo in Norway. So I ended up coming to Oslo and my day one assignment was to coordinate AI research for Norway. So I was in this very small team where my role was a senior advisor. So I wrote a bunch of proposals for Norway to build a national research school, which had in the very initial years around 250 PhD candidates. And we organized a lot of kind of, I would say, pioneering stuff. Like we organized the first AlphaFold workshop for which now the Chemistry Nobel Prize is given last year. So when the papers came out, I organized this workshop, which we had the first author of Rosetta Fold. We had people from various organizations talking about the impact of algorithms like AlphaFold on protein folding and all that. So in this 3-year journey where I was kind of a fence sitter in a way to a lot of progress that was happening in the field of AI, because from deep learning we moved to generative AI, and there came a moment that I was starting to reflect on what we were doing in Samajh. We were building a model for everything. So if we have to do million things, we'll build million models, and which was not really scalable and not viable. Yeah. And around this time, my co-founder visited me in Oslo, which was last year, December, 2023. And he started to pick my brain, that what do I think, in my opinion, is the opportunity. So I told him, the way AI is kind of changing from supervised learning to, this new era of generative AI, we don't need a lot of data anymore to solve problems. And we started to think about video, because we were doing traffic monitoring and we thought, okay, video is a bunch of pixels. Nobody understands video. So how about we build a technology that can help democratize the intelligence in video to the world. Yeah. And then we could be really at the frontier of it. And around this time, so we started to play with this idea, could we build a new venture which would do this? So we named this venture as Universal Knowledge and Understanding of Media. That's what Ukumi stands for. Got it. So we don't have any cultural ideas for this name, but it's just that from a, technology or scientific inspired bent, that we want to understand the media, and that's what Ukumi is about. So we have spent the entire 1 year, I would say 2024, maybe pivoting a couple of times, shaping up what we wanted to do. And in that process, I ended up meeting you in Palo Alto. So you have already witnessed some of it.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, for me, both of us coming from India, I thought there's a Sanskrit background to Ukumi or something like that you were going to say, but it sounds like that. But I mean, you have a more logical reasoning to why you called it Ukumi, which makes a lot of sense. Coming from, say, Samajh.ai to Ukumi? I mean, there's obviously a correlation that both have videos, both have pixels, and all of that. What's the vision for Ukumi? I mean, what is kind of the narrowed down problem that you're trying to solve with Ukumi itself?
So, Anthony, I think you are sitting in the place in the world where future is built, and which is the Bay Area. So we wanted to test our idea, and when we visited Bay Area twice last year, the idea was to see what we want to build, does the world need it? And it seems like from a technology standpoint, we were sounding a bit theoretical that we want to understand video. Then people would come back to say, understand video for what? What is the use case? So we realized whether we need a solid use case, and we stumbled upon this whole ecosystem around YouTube, that there are some 200 million creators out there which are uploading videos every day on YouTube. And we realized that a problem that a specific category among those are podcasters, including yourself, who are producing content. And this content, the moment they kind of record it and post it, it may actually take them 2 to 3 weeks to publish it. So we realized that one way we can land our technology aspirations on understanding video is to go back to these podcasters who are high frequency podcasters, that could we enable what they want to do in 10 minutes, not let's say a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. And we have realized that people spend up to $1,000 depending on their setup, maybe even $200 to $1,000, 2 to 3 weeks. So we thought maybe we can automate this. So this is where, let's say we started around 6 months ago. So we put up a Discord server, and we started to put these skills, where somebody could punch in a video URL and they could get, let's say, a bunch of functions on top of it. Let's say they want to create a thumbnail, they want to create viral shots, so on and so forth. And from there, we took it even further, that we realized that, this DIY kind of stuff is good, but still people have a lot of cognitive effort. And we also realized that the current AI tools, they do not give levers to people that they can really control the output. So it's like the current batch of AI tools are like, throw something at it, something comes out. If it fits you, you got lucky. If it doesn't fit you, then there is a struggle, to make it work iteratively. So this was the kind of pain point we wanted to solve for creators. And in this journey, we have been learning and we have been adopting. Right now, our approach to this is that we are spending time with creators, what we call as recipe. So we want to learn their method. We bake their method for one time into our interface. From then on, they don't have to do a lot. They come and put their recording URL, and following their recipe, we can give them their episode, let's say in 10 minutes. What we are calling this is as a cognitive architecture. So we are basically making decisions on behalf of our customers. At the same time, we are helping with a log or a reasoning interface that they understand, if we edit this, why did we edit this? For example, in this podcast, at some point, I was coughing, and maybe in the actual version, you may edit it, right?
Yeah.
So can I detect that automatically? Can I remove it? And all you see in the interface is that this portion was removed because the guest was coughing. And so you are okay with that decision because you are convinced with the reasoning. Yeah. So this is the approach that Ukumi is building. And as we move forward, I think for us, it will become more and more relevant that what are the decisions that a creator has to make in their journey, and how can we assist them in their decision-making process.
Makes sense. Yeah. I mean, that's great. I mean, I use this tool that we're currently recording on, right? I mean, I see some of what you're saying real hand. I mean, but still a lot of what I do is manual to do post-production and push it out. And in a way, I mean, the problem or the challenge you're trying to solve for, it doesn't necessarily have to be for the so-called, tagged video creators on YouTube. I mean, in today's world with a phone, everybody is a creator, right? whether it's your family Christmas video or your birthday video, if you will. I mean, instances or examples like what you said, like a very small example to remove some unwanted distortion from a video could be used by anybody, right? So, you're starting off somewhere, but I see the vision for video because, video is like omnipresent. Everybody uses it, right? And it's just not a YouTube thing anymore. So that's pretty cool. So where are you in
Yeah,
the journey? Sorry, go ahead.
I think for us, it was more about picking a focus area.
Yeah.
Seems like people like yourself, are doing this, and there is a sizable number of podcasters out there today. And for us to perfect our kind of product, this seemed like a natural choice where we could have high volumes.
Yeah, indeed. I can see the potential. So where are you in the journey, Sachin? Is the product ready to go? Do you have some pilot customers using it? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so initially we were building it out for fun. So we were calling it like an alpha release, so which is what we had in a Discord community where we had processed a couple of thousands of videos already in the 1 month of launch. And then we realized that Discord was limiting us in the way we want to build the functionality going out. So Discord would remain as an experimental playground for us. From there, we went to a kind of a beta launch where we wanted to see how creators want to see end to end, not more like a DIY, not just another thing in their toolkit. So we ended up working with a DC based creator. They have 4 podcasts. And just last week, we ended up raising our first invoice to them. But thank you. And what we learned working with them, that, for example, for them, we're interviewing people, let's say like Sundar Pichai or anybody who's a high flyer. They were having a backlog of 6 months. So when you're interviewing, let's say, a world leader on a topic of AI, where progress happens in a matter of days, right? How relevant the content is 6 months down the line. Maybe it's already outdated, right? Yeah. So their biggest pain point was that can they put these episodes out with speed, and they were working with an agency outsource model. So it seems like that's the biggest thing why they come to Ukumi, is that they can give us an episode and it's done in no time, exactly following their requirements. So we are lucky there. These people are using Zoom. Now we're adding a couple more platforms, including the one that you are recording on right now, and also Studio. So we are adding this kind of platform coverage step by step. So we are targeting like a public launch later this month. So I'll keep you posted when it's ready. You can probably come and experience it.
Yeah, I'll look forward to that. So in terms of funding and where the company is, for those folks listening, are you talking to investors right now? Are you open to angels? What is your current funding situation?
Yeah, so like I said, in the beginning, that sometimes I'm just curious. So a couple of years ago, when I was in this position to organize the AI research for Norway, we were creating webinars in VR. So it was something really interesting. I don't know if you've tried that. So we could have also, hung out in Oculus VR and done this same thing, but with more of our avatars, So when I was doing that, I got some ideas, and, I wrote a proposal to Meta. Meta gave me $30,000, which was the first money that we used to build this company, right? Very so nice. in that sense, we were lucky that initial first 6 months or so, we could build our experimental prototype with that money, that the grant we got. And from there, my co-founder and myself, we were kind of self-funding it. And then when we got convinced with our direction, let's say after making a couple of Bay Area visits, you get the feedback direct and honest and on the face. So that's what you really learn from Bay Area, is that we realized that, okay, which is our focus area in this video understanding? And then once we understood that it's podcasters, I think it took us 5 minutes to raise more than $500,000. And we again got very lucky. My co-founder, he's from booking.com, and his ex-boss from there, who's the chief product officer, he made a commitment that he would do angel invest, and he was in the board of companies like Fiverr and Wix. So I think it was just a 5-minute online call with the founder of Fiverr, and he was just disappointed in us that why are we raising so less? And we thought, we just need this build money, and the use case itself is kind of paying and rewarding that we can build the company from there. So raising money had not been struggle, and we have been lucky there to find very, very formidable angel investors. So we have a vice president from Meta, a vice president from Google, and two of these founders from Fiverr and Wix.com. So it seems like we have right kind of support right now in terms of people who could help us, go to our next phase of the company. We are since then, so this is November that I'm talking about. Since December, whole of December, we have been focused on servicing this customer, building his product out. And now from here on, we want to basically convert from this n is equal to 1 to, let's say, n is equal to 100. The day we have, let's say, we can demonstrate that what we're building has a repeatable, value, and there are more than one customer for there, then we probably go for a seed round. And we also believe that the way we are billing and kind of processing our customers, it's going to be a quite cash-rich business.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I mean, everyone is as lucky when it comes to funding, right? I mean, I know I use the word lucky, but I mean, it's also a testament to what you're building, right? I mean, when people look at it, you get funding in 5 minutes and you have a live customer. I mean, a lot of startups would die for that particular kind of start, right? So kudos to you and your co-founder for knocking on the right doors, knowing the right people to do that, and of course narrowing down on a potential, which is also super important, right? I mean, you rightly said the use cases might be 100, but you want to start with one, hone the product better before you kind of branch out into other things. So you got the right recipe going there, Sachin. And while you mentioned it, I was also going to ask you about the work you did with the Oslo ecosystem, right, while you were there in Norway. Can you share a little bit more about how that experience has been? I mean, because from what I heard from you in person, I mean, it was a fascinating set of people. Obviously, the government is involved to help companies there in that particular region. Can you share a little bit more about that, Sachin?
Yeah, definitely. So I think thanks to ChatGPT, ever since it came out, I think AI has become a very mainstream discussion. Before that, maybe it was happening in a closer kind of circles, let's say more developer or research centric people. But I think post ChatGPT, not just Norway, but I think the conversation became mainstream political conversation in Europe. And the target there has been language. So here in this part of the world where I'm, let's say Norway, less than 5 million people here, and they speak a language, they have their own culture. And when you start to use tools like ChatGPT, which is, let's say, developed in your part of the world, right? Then how you perceive that as a society, especially it becomes so pervasive in your day-to-day use, you can actually end up overpowering, let's say, whatever is yours from what is coming from outside. So there was this whole debate, let's say, I would say 2 years ago, going on, that big American companies, which let's say has the resources and the talent to develop such big AI models, what can small countries do? What is their relevance in the future, right? Because we know that some of the big tech companies are already bigger than many small countries. So it boils down to, I would say, three things. And if you think from a policymaker's perspective, that if you want to keep your work force relevant for the future and not make a future which is very asymmetric, where power is in few hands and not everybody is able to reap the benefits. So you want to give people the training. So meaning people should have access to knowledge. And there we should also mention, for example, Finland, one of the professor from University of Helsinki, Timo Roos, he started Elements for AI already in 2018-19. And they ended up educating 4% of their population in just 1 year, right? And then that course was distributed in the whole of Europe. So I think training is one where, let's say, I was heavily involved, which was how do we take care of PhD candidates. So I built collaborations on behalf of Norway with the Alan Turing Institute in UK, with Helmholtz in Germany. So how do you build a more robust kind of environment to train next in AI? So I think that has been a bigger focus in Europe. So there are much more bigger initiatives like in Sweden and Europe wide, which is called ELIS, for example, which is a lot of spending money on training doctoral students. The other is compute. You cannot do much. You may have heard the GPU song, right? So Jensen Huang is these days everywhere. So I think when you see him in Europe, mostly it's because some European government has invited him to launch a supercomputer which is powered by NVIDIA. So I think this is another democratization that the governments here are pushing for, that do they have enough compute? Wherever they cannot give it to the companies because that will be violating competition laws, but they can give it to researchers. They can enable them. Right. And the third element here is that if I go back to my original point about language, you cannot work on, let's say, ChatGPT for Norwegian, right, until you have good data set for Norwegian language. And for example, here in Norway, there's something called as Royal Norwegian Library, where for last 20 years, 150 people have been working on digitizing Norwegian culture. So which becomes like a national asset that you can use to train a language model, right, or a transcription model. Because whatever is built, let's say by OpenAI, for example, if you take Whisper, right, which is going to transcribe. So the word error rate for Norwegian is not anywhere close to English. So Whisper would work perfectly well for English. So if Norwegians have to, let's say, improve their productivity, where they want Norwegian to be transcribed. For example, whenever I'm using my Apple iPhone, it says Norsk Bokmål is not available because it's not a priority for Apple. 5 million people do not matter. So who's going to solve it for Norway? So Norway has to solve it for itself. So that's the kind of operating principle here, Anthony, that if these three things are available and then you come as a startup person, you may have a talented person available to you. If you have a research collaboration, you may have compute available to you. And then the last thing is data sets. If these three ingredients are there, I think this is more like a qualifying aspect. So many countries world over, they may not have a very structured approach in making these enablers. But I think as politicians world over are waking up to the reality which the next future is going to be, they are trying to make these enablers for the ecosystem.
I'm always fascinated to see how some of these small countries around the world, try to do what is right for them and their people, stand up, make the investments to do it, which is super forward thinking of them. Obviously in your part of the world, like you said, much like where we come from, right? Every state speaks a different language. Every country has its own language, so they need to figure out what works for their own people. And the speed at which they operate also fascinates me. I've been in Germany and Oslo's ecosystem. Despite the small population, despite the small economy, all of those governments do what is right to cater to the needs of their own people and their economies, even if it means that, doing something different from what the rest of the world would do. And that translates to the startup ecosystem, the funding that they get for those ecosystems. I was in a conference in India 3 months ago, and there were so many Nordic countries that were trying to tap into India talent and investments from India because they have a laundry list of problems for their country they want to solve for, right? But they're obviously reaching out elsewhere to tap into the talent and investments.
Definitely.
So let's wrap this up with a quick few rapid fire questions, Sachin. I call this the Dilse questionnaire. So any role model for you in your career whom you keep going back to for advice? You obviously have your ups and downs, anyone whom you tap into?
Yeah, I think definitely. So some of the people I will mention, they're more like ideal, not the people I can really access. So when I was starting my first venture, I thought of APJ Abdul Kalam as someone that I would always look up to in terms of innovation. From Tata, I would say JRD Tata in terms of building an ethical business, and E. Sridharan, for building something world class. Like he built the Delhi Metro, which every time you use, you are surprised that you can have something high quality. So I think in that sense, there are a couple of people that in my life and in the companies I built, I feel that I can look up to. On a personal basis, I was always been lucky to find people around me who I can draw inspiration from. So unfortunately, my close contact, Dr. VK Singh, he passed away early last year. So he was an army general, and he came to me when he was 70 that he wanted to do a startup. And I had met him because I had written a chapter in his book, and the other editor of the book was from Aalto. He was a professor. So Paul Lilrank had connected us with VK, and I spent 9 years with Dr. VK collaborating on various healthcare topics, wrote several books. But I was so amazed by simple things about his own life, the way he conducted himself. So that 9 years when, Dr. Singh was, let's say, from 71 to 79, I would say a lot of mentorship for me. So, for me, something to give back to society, how do you make yourself available to others? I think this is what I learned from him. So, yeah, I'm really thankful for, such people in my life who have kind of made me part of their life and, shared their wisdom.
Yeah, we always come across those good Samaritans and people whom we thankful for life. So I'm glad you have them. I know you're an avid reader, Sachin. You're always on top of. In the few times we've met, you always know what's going on in the world. Any favorite books or recommendations for wannabe founders or anyone for that matter?
Yeah, I think this one book that I would draw lessons for entrepreneurship is Siddhartha, which is like a classical, very small book, fast read. But in my recent readings, that books that are impacting me. So a friend of mine suggested me The Ministry for the Future. It's about the climate change-led impact starting from countries like India. It's a science fiction novel. So it led me to sponsor a hackathon last year on heat waves in India. And so that has kind of encouraged me to do something. This year again, I've been reading some books. So a book is about super processed foods. So it's called Super Processed People. So it's about all the food that we eat, which is not even food. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe you're looking for one suggestion, but it's always
No, I
changing.
have not heard of some of these books myself. So thanks for sharing. And given your experience, given the serial entrepreneurship and investments that you've done, if somebody were to ask you for advice, somebody who says, okay, I have an idea, Sachin, any word of advice that you would give me before I get started, what would that be?
Yeah, so I think what I am always learning in these contexts is that, how to really start small, how to make, let's say, failure easy, So instead of investing a lot of time and energy in doing something really big, can we prove whatever is the thesis by doing something very, very small?
Got it. Yeah, that's super important advice, but still a lot of founders fall prey to saying, oh, let me build out the whole thing before I knock on potential customers' doors, right? So thanks for that. So Sachin, again, thank you for taking the time. Best of luck to Ukumi, to you and your team. Like you said, you're at n equal to 1. I wish n equal to multiple times x very soon. And we will get you back on the podcast then. Until then, thanks so much. All the best to you and the team. Lovely speaking to you, and we'll stay in touch.
Yeah, the pleasure is all mine, Anthony. Thank you very much for having me.